Hi, Florida team. It's Melissa. Moda, now Kane. um, I wanted to show you guys a organizational tool that I created that is helping me out a lot this new year. So I told Giselyn I was going to make a video just showing what I kind of do every week. It's almost seems like it's more work, but I definitely feel more organized. And I kind of see myself once I look up a student, I don't remember what I did with them last month or last week. So I go back into the feed and I'm looking and searching what was the last email I sent them. So this kind of organizes me what emails I've sent them and what contact I've made with each student using this Excel sheet. So I call this the intervention MPM template. Let me see if I can fix it so you guys can see the bottom. So on the first page, I have Kristen's wonderful chart that she created for us, the intervention plan, just to remind me if I see a student that's behind pace, what tier they should be in, and then same thing with mastery and attendance. And then you'll see how I kind of go through this sheet. Tuesdays, I focus on attendance. Wednesdays, pacing, and then mastery on Thursdays. And then you'll see I have a waiver tab and no flags tab. So these two tabs I do on Fridays. So if I have students that are on waivers and students that have no flags, they're good on pacing, they're good on mastery, they're good on attendance, then they're in my good list and they are my happy list. And on Fridays when I get to send them awesome emails. So on the first thing, I have the chart. And then, so let's say it's Tuesday, I go to attendance and, especially now since we're getting a lot of new enrollments, let's say I have student A. I write what district they're in. Let's say they're from Palm Beach. Sometimes the date they were added to my roster is not the same as their start date. So I think, oh, I've only had the student for a day, but they actually were supposed to start 2 weeks ago. So then that completely throws off the attendance. So I put those two things there for a reason, just so I know, hey, I got the student on this day, so that's why I sent the welcome letter late and they're behind on my tiers, etc. So let's say they got added to my roster today. I'm making this video on the 5th. And their start date was actually last week, just so I know. And well, I got the student on today, so I sent them the welcome letter today. Then as the weeks go by, week 1, I would send tier 1 attendance if they have not worked, tier 2 after 2 weeks, and then tier 3 after 3 weeks, and so on. And then I have in the blue for those students, I keep them all the attendance students. Every single one of my students is going to be in the attendance booklet, and I'll show you how I kind of decipher who is still in the tiers and who isn't. Because if at some point they stop working, then that's when they become in the blue zone and they have a last login date and the days since last worked. And then that's when they're also in the attendance tier because they're not working anymore. So let's say I have that student, I entered them. And then for student B, let's say I had them and they're from Duval last week, and I'm looking this week, and I'm just gonna keep them like they did add on the correct day. and then I'm going to create different scenarios that I've been dealing with. So let's say student B has not worked, then I send them tier 1, I send them tier 2 when they're not working, and I leave them as blank. Once student C, let's say that student C starts working, I'm going to leave student C there, and I'm going to highlight it in green, knowing I know they started working, and then I'm going to send them over to, let's say, Palm Beach doesn't have any waivers or anything, but they started getting behind on pacing. So then I send them over to the pacing, and then I add the end date. So I know when their end date is, and I'm dealing with that. So my sheet kind of looks where I have some students that are in green, some students that are white, which means they're currently in the attendance tiers. And then I do have a student that was from the summer, and he's on recommended drop. So then I put him in red. So I know which students are recommended drop. And you guys can change the colors and do whatever you want. I just wanted to show you guys what I'm doing to keep myself more organized. So student D is red. They're not working. They're on recommended drop. And I'm not going to put them from Duval because Duval has waivers. Let's say they're from Wakulla. That way I know this student's not working. I'm automatically going to send them a recommended drop template, and I can see what date I put on here that they were recommended drop. Also, afterwards, I put if I'm making phone calls, when they've gotten a phone call last, and then the date for that phone call. And you can just keep going down the sheet with phone calls, text messages, and that's another way to keep track of who you've been calling, because right now I still don't have an organizational way of figuring out who I've called every month, because I know we're supposed to call student once a month. But I've also added that phone call to the end of each of these sheets since I've been doing this. So that's what I do for attendance on Tuesdays. And then I go to pacing. And like I said, all of my students are here, and they're either in green, which means they are on another page now. They're in white because they're still attendance tiers. And then they're in red if they're recommended drop. So if they're green, I will see the student duplicated either in pacing because they're behind pace, mastery because they have a low test grade or a low grade overall. Waivers, once the student starts working, and they're on a waiver, I go ahead and put them in there as well. So I know that they're on, I remember the waiver kids, and then also my no flag, which are my great kids that are on pace, doing well, and they're amazing. So on pacing, I have student C. I add the end date just so I'm aware of how fast they need to finish their course. So let's say their end date is on the 20th of December. And then I add pacing alert 1 when I sent it. Let's say I sent them today a pacing alert. That way I know next week I'm supposed to send them in a week, which would be the 12th. I would send them, or sometime next week, the tier 2 if they continually are going down and not working. So then they're 20 to 30%. But if they're still in the 10 to 20%, then I would, for next week, write that I sent them an email on that day. So pacing, that's basically how I keep my pacing alerts. I also have some students that have responded back to me. So I have a notes column now where I say, this student responded, is working, check back on Friday to make sure they are using the guide, the pacing guide that I've sent them. And that's just something I can always check myself, remind myself. And then Friday would be 9/7, no, 9/8. So I know what date I'm supposed to go back and look at their work. Mastery works the same way. If a student's behind, I put the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the dates that I've been doing, and then I write notes. If they've attended tutoring, if they're working towards their mastery in any way, they've responded to me, so I know I'm not talking to a wall. For the waivers, I like to do the waivers in a separate category because we're not supposed to send them pacing alerts, especially Duval, dealing with all the sickness and the hospital things that they're dealing with. So I just like to write myself what email I sent them, a short description, and then what date I sent it. And then I actually have this for a few days. And I think as I continue, I'm going to run out of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it per month. So this might be my August/September sheet, and then I will move on to an October, November sheet, just so I'm not continually going to the right, or I might just keep going on the same sheet. I haven't decided yet. So I have, let's say, a type of email that says, looks at their work. So critiqued or gave tips on assignments. And then I know that I gave them tips on their assignments that week. So then following week, I'm going to touch on checking up with them on something else. Let's say instead of giving tips on assignments, I also gave them tips on mastery. So tutoring, sent them videos, basically whatever I sent, I write. So I'm keeping track of what I'm sending every week, to each student. So I don't have to, the basis of this is so I don't go back and look, I'm looking through the feed on what's emails I sent out to the student already. And then the last one, no flags, my awesome kids, description of the email that I sent, and then the date, and that's pretty much it. And like I said, if they stay in this category, then they'll be every date having a new awesome email or enrichment activities. And I would specify which enrichment activity I'm used just so I know I'm not using the same one over and over every week. So that's my organizational tool for this year. If you guys have any questions, just email me. And I hope to talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening.